Chapter 1: The Fractured Sanctuary and Blood in the Water. The red door at 422 wasn't always a barrier to keep things out. For a long time, it was just home. I was born into that house on April 6, 2001. To the outside world, it was government housing, a collection of brick and siding designed for families who needed a helping hand to keep a roof over their children's heads. But to a kid, you don't see assistance. You see the sidewalk where the neighbors gathered for birthday parties. You see the flickering blue light of the television in the living room, filled with the comforting neon-colored worlds of old Disney Channel and Nickelodeon shows. Those were the light days. I can still smell the starch of my clothes as I got ready for church on Sunday mornings with my grandma. There was a rhythm to our lives there, a predictable, safe heartbeat. We were surrounded by family, and for a while the only things we had to fear were the very real, very human struggles of the world. The year I was born was the year the world began to tilt. In July 2001, just months after I arrived, my grandpa passed away unexpectedly. A blood clot in his leg traveled to his heart, stealing him from us in an instant. 2 months later, I was a baby in my mother's arms as she watched the smoke rise from the World Trade Center on September 11th. The house at 422 saw its share of earthly misery. There were nights of quiet tension where the air felt thick with the worry of whether the rent would be paid on time. There were the seasonal floods when the septic system backed up, bringing the literal filth of the earth into our sanctuary. And there were the bullies, cruel, physical reminders that the world wasn't always kind, living just doors away in the same complex. But the good outweighed the bad. The laughter from the family gatherings echoed louder than the pipes, and the memories we made were anchored in love. It was a family home. It was a place of prayer and Sunday best. It was the one place on earth where I should have been safe. I didn't know then that the bad days, the grief, the floods, the bullies, were just the surface. They were nothing compared to the thing that was waiting for its invitation. They were nothing compared to the silence that would eventually settle over. 422. A silence that didn't feel like peace, but like a predator holding its breath. We lived there for years, unaware that the foundation of our lives was built over a void. We thought we knew what it meant to be afraid. We thought fear was a late bill or a playground shove. We were so incredibly wrong. The peace of 422 was never a solid foundation. It was a thin veil, and as I grew older, that veil began to tear. The safety of the Sunday morning starch was replaced by a new, internal violence, a panic disorder that turned my own body into a cage. I was 10 years old the first time the world closed in on me. We were on a highway, driving to visit a friend of my mother's in West Branch, Michigan. I remember the heat of the day pressing against the glass, the vehicle feeling smaller and tighter with every mile. Suddenly, the air was gone. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic, non-stop rhythm that I was certain would only end in my death. I leaned over in the back seat, desperate to suppress the pulse, to keep my soul from shaking loose. My mother looked back at me, and for the first time, I saw my own terror reflected in her eyes. She thought I was dying too. For a year, I lived in that state of emergency. Doctors moved me onto medications designed for children who are too young to know the word mortality. But I knew it. I developed what they call health anxiety. Every stray ache or irregular breath was a signal that the end was coming. My faith, once a roadmap, began to feel like a dead end. I was an avid churchgoer at Deerfield Primitive Baptist Church near Linden, Michigan, but the sanctuary no longer felt like a refuge. The preachers there would jump and wail on the stand, crying their souls out to the congregation. They spoke of the beauty of God's path, but they also preached a paralyzing fear of him. I remember Daniel, the pastor's son, standing before us as a young boy. He held his face and sobbed, proclaiming he couldn't wait for his last breath so he could finally see the face of God. To him, it was a beautiful surrender. To me, a boy already terrified of the grave, it was a nightmare. If God was real, why was my body a battlefield? Why was I suffering through these thoughts while the world moved on so regularly? The years that followed only validated my cynicism. Death wasn't a spiritual transition. It was a relentless thief. December 1st, 2013. My father, who had abandoned me for drugs years prior, passed away. Months later, my uncle, my father's brother, took his own life, unable to carry the guilt of my dad's passing. December 1st, 2014. Exactly 1 year later, my mother was nearly murdered by her partner of 20 years. He was involved in a serious crime and tried to force her to transport him. When she wouldn't, he almost took her life. November 2016. My friend Tori committed suicide by jumping in front of a train. By the time I reached my teens, the peaceful child who watched Disney Channel was gone, replaced by a self-centered, arrogant shell of a person. Everything in life had become a challenge, a loophole, a hurdle to jump through, just to survive the minimum. I had lost sight of the light. I didn't know it then, but this internal darkness, this cocktail of grief, health anxiety, and a crumbling faith, was like blood in the water. I was broadcasting a signal of fear and negativity into the atmosphere of 422. And in the spiritual realm, something was finally starting to listen.